Hello and welcome back to Tai'Shar a Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Sam.
I'm Will.
We are back. It's 2021. I've written
Wow.
2020 so many times already.
Yes. Which you would think of all the years that we would all get over that tendency to, it's
Right.
like this would be the one because we've
it feels like it's December 37th, 2020, and it's what it is.
you're just kind of stuck there. Yeah.
Stuck, man.
Yeah, we're I've seen memes that say stuff like, oh, well, here's to 2022.
On that note, I know we're a Wheel of Time podcast. I think I gotta address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
What is up with the polar vortex?
Yeah.
I was reading today that the polar vortex, I don't know, it imploded or it broke. Something happened. It's going to be cold. But I had previously read that La Nina was going to make it a warm winter. So it sounds like backyard wrestling, like La Nina versus the polar vortex, So
yeah, that was definitely the elephant I thought you were talking about.
Right. It's been a slow week for news.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I was, as I was, writing up my notes for today, I was like avoiding making some joke about, storming the palace at Camelin or something.
Right. You wouldn't want to joke about insurrection today.
Yeah.
Poor taste, perhaps.
Probably. I don't know.
But we're here to talk about Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
Not the polar vortex or Camelin insurrections. So, on that note, this is a show update, ladies and gentlemen. So we are going to discuss the television show that will appear on our television screens at some point in the future. We hope.
Yes.
We really do hope. On that note, as it is a television show discussion, we are a spoiler zone. Spoilers are completely on the table and will be discussed in depth. All the spoilers. Darth Vader is Luke's father, etc., etc., etc. So consider yourself warned. And if you are not through reading any books at all, check back in with us when we revisit Eye of the World next week.
Yes. Yeah. I am looking forward to that. I know. And I totally understand, Sammy, you were saying, it's kind of hard to get motivated to.
It is. I started reading. So I'm going to be doing like some of the middle chapters. And I started reading chapter 13 and it was sort of wacky fun. We've been doing the slog books. And so it's fun to go back and like, here's the part where Rand meets Min and thinks she looks like a boy. It's like, okay, I'm kind of into this. This is fun. So
right.
It'll be a good time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So yes. I do feel like as we are progressing towards the show, it reminds me of all the many times that I've been driving into or through Atlanta, and wherever I'm going, the amount of time my GPS is telling me doesn't change no matter how far I go.
True.
That's the way it feels. It's like you can't get more. Like there's been so many times I've been going someplace in Atlanta, and it was like, okay, it'll take me an hour to get there, and then half an hour later, it's like, okay, you still got an hour to go. That's
right. I was just trying to go to Waffle House down the road, man.
Right. Exactly. That's the way it feels. It's like we're progressing and we're like, okay, getting closer. All right.
The key is to use Apple Maps, and it generally is. It's refreshingly pessimistic. Google Maps is always like, you might be there in 20 minutes, and then like 5 minutes later, 35 minutes, or still 20 minutes. Whereas Apple Maps is like at the start, it's like, I don't know, man, an hour and 15, and then sure enough, it's around an hour and 15.
Right.
It's like, I don't know if it's because Apple Maps are just awful, or they're just like compensating for that by being as pessimistic as possible. But I've found that generally my expectations are not too high when I use Apple Maps.
It does feel like there needs to be an understanding that somewhere in this, a space-time continuum rip is going to happen, and you're going to lose at least 45 minutes of your life. And be like
Google is like, we reserve the right to revise our estimate on the fly, and you don't get a say in that. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, it should. Anytime you plug it in a destination near Atlanta or where you have to drive through Atlanta, it should just say IDK.
Yeah, pretty much.
Shrug,
Yeah.
shrug emoji. Like,
Just a black hole for your estimated time of arrival. That's your.
Right.
You're going to go into a black hole, and we don't know what's going to happen because we've never been in a black hole before. But you're going to Atlanta, so enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. All right, enough of the Georgia native joking.
Well, Rand has to use Apple Maps to get to the eye of the world. I mean,
It's
it's
true.
there. It's in the book. Spoiler alert.
we already did the spoiler alert,
know,
so
right?
we can talk about the
good.
Apple Maps scene. All right, so starting us off with some unofficial news. We got various Instagram posts. Every now and then people will post things like, Alexander William posted this or Yosha posted this. And it doesn't tell us anything, but they're like, they mentioned that they're filming or whatever. And it's like,
kind of good. I mean, the fact that they're filming.
Well, but the thing is, they don't actually say they're filming. They say like hashtag WOT and that's it,
Man.
And the bottom line is they're not filming. We're pretty sure because they, kind of
right.
quit on us a couple of months ago. It's pretty clear. They're just posting old photos and none of these are really giving us any new information. There was the one that Alexandre, I don't know. I'll be curious to hear how he pronounces his name. Tom, he posted one and it was just mildly humorous because he in the background there was a sign that said like no social media or photos or something like that, and it had a Wheel of Time logo, but that was it. Right. That was the extent of it. Priyanka Bose, who will be playing Alana, was asked on social media if she knows yet when the show will be premiering, and she said, "You'll know soon." Yeah, I don't know. Many are taking this as some kind of confirmation that we'll get a premiere date. Given the way Priyanka posts things, I would take it with a grain of salt. She tends to be a little kind of overstating of things. She was the one that posted the picture of her script revealing the title when she didn't have permission to.
Oh,
so
right.
I don't know if she totally understands how rabid the fans are for
anything.
Yeah. Anyway, it's crazy to think. A little sad and frustrating, but if it weren't for this pandemic, we might be watching the show this month.
Oh man. Fair point.
Don't know that for sure, but I mean,
seems
a lot of people
certainly possible. Yeah,
speculated that it would have been this month that it would have premiered.
Dang.
It's just crazy to think, but that's how nuts. I feel like it's taken me almost a year, but I think I've accepted that the pandemic is not going to be over this past summer.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough.
And that's just that we all have to deal with that. I think, in our own timeline.
We had a different idea of how things would go, and it hasn't gone that way in June 2020.
We mentioned this last month, but as it sits, the last word we got on when they'll finish up filming was from the company that handles hiring extras, and they say it won't be until April. I wondered if that wasn't based off of something that the Czech Republic has released about their vaccine rollout plan.
Oh, yeah.
I tried to research that, and it actually bummed me out because they're not doing great right now over there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And cases have really had a surge in the last month. The good news is that they've gone ahead and ordered enough vaccines to cover almost their entire population.
Right on.
Unlike some countries I know of.
Or even states.
Right. But the bad news is that, they've only been able to administer about 20,000 so far, and they're only expected to administer another 20,000 by the end of this month. And which I'm kind of like, the UK has already had millions, and I mean, what are they? They're not making Wheel of Time. Come on.
Right.
Get your priorities straight over there, Europe. Hopefully, though, I'm thinking if they're able to ramp it up, in theory, as more and more vaccines get rolled out, we should see the numbers begin to flatten out.
Right. That's the dream.
Right. And so even if it's not like everybody's vaccinated, if there's a significant enough portion of the population that's inoculated to the virus, then hopefully that'll help stabilize things. But Honestly, I don't know, man. I mean,
Yeah, I hear that.
the like I said, I was looking at their numbers, and they're competing with some states over here.
Oh,
And
really? Oh, wow. That's
yeah,
funny states.
yeah. Well, I mean, and it's a pretty small country. That's the thing, like,
Right.
But anyway, yeah. So yeah, a little bit happier news. And Madeline Madden, Gwen herself, shared some photos on her Instagram. I'm going to try to remember to add this link to the description in the podcast. So if you're listening to us, you should be able to go to the description and click the link. And or if you're on YouTube, you can click down in the doobly-doo. It should be there. And this was all pre-COVID. Also, side note, it looks like they were like film photographs. So she was taking like some film photography, old school. Anyway, they're kind of interesting. A couple of shots of Kay Alexander, whose hair is cut even more like the Min Farshaw that I think we all expect to see.
Yep.
And
pretty cool.
This seems to make it likely that we're going to see Min in the first few episodes, because this would have had to have been during like the first first at least 3 episodes.
Makes sense.
And yeah, right. It's just kind of interesting because we hadn't, her casting hadn't even been revealed back then. And so I think I was one that was kind of almost thinking, well, I could see them pushing her to the second season even.
Right.
But I'll be curious to see if they kind of expand her role any to kind of just...
Yeah, at first she is just kind of have like some throwaway lines, like kind of almost a cameo early on there. It's a fair point.
And another small but exciting detail out of these photos is that one of them seems to show Zoe Robbins with braids in her hair. There's another one in the same set of photos that has her without any braids, and her hair's all poofed out, as happens if you have had braids in your hair and remove them.
Right.
Makes me wonder if the braided picture is the way Nynaeve's hair is going to look for the show. Purists will be upset if this proves to be the case, however, as it is multiple braids instead of one big one.
Aha.
Me personally, I can handle the change as long as they're tuggable.
That is an essential detail. I noticed that Madeline Madden is also in Ark, the animated series, in which she's has a bow and arrow and is riding on the back of a dinosaur. There's a photo of that also in her Instagram. Very, very much on topic. There's some dinosaur riding that happens.
Sure, yeah. Yeah. In fact, maybe that might be one of the changes that Rafe is going to talk about in the Q&A.
Right.
Which
the last episode will be animated. Or they could pull a Smallville and just have it, just be a comic book.
A comic book, yeah.
Please don't do that. There's already a comic book of Eye of the World. I haven't read it.
Right. It's basically Eye of the World.
That fits expectations.
WatchSeries.com reports a rumor of a scene not shown in the books that involves the women's circle and some sort of initiation rite, maybe? I don't know. The evidence seems a little suspect to me and the details are sketchy. But since we're talking about changes from the book today, or we will be here in a second, I thought I'd go ahead and throw it up there. Again, this link should be in the description.
Oh, right on.
They say the scene involves caves and jumping from cliffs. Yeah, I don't know. And
there's not a lot of jumping in Wheel of Time.
not a whole lot. I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens. And then the article points to a part of one of the leaked Gwen audition scenes, which, as I've said before, probably doesn't mean anything.
They're just wildly speculating.
Right.
Just like grasping at straws.
Rarely do audition scenes actually reflect anything in the actual script, precisely because they're almost always leaked. And because, I mean, it's just they're handed out to so many people. So
yeah, you love it when an article says perhaps the show decided. Mm-hmm. That's always a good start.
Yeah, I almost didn't include this because it does seem to largely be a rumor.
It's fun. It's interesting.
It's interesting. The most concrete thing is that there have been some photos taken that seem to show a group of women in costume by a river. That was back in October of 2019. October.
A different time.
October of 2019, when groups of people could gather and not worry about killing anyone accidentally.
And if you wore a mask, you're like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah, you're a weirdo. Simpler time. Yeah, one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring this one up is because it would be an added scene potentially that would represent the kind of the departures from the book, which is kind of, it's a little bit, I think, the theme of this episode, or at least the theme of what we're going to be talking about from Rafe's Q&A here in a second. So that actually segues into our official news.
Aha.
First, another mini teaser trailer. If you haven't seen it yet, it's all on the What On Prime accounts, Twitter and Instagram and everywhere. They saw it fit to drop a few more crumbs from the dinner table down to us. This one gives us two little things. One, we get to hear the first line from Alexandre William as Tom, which is exciting. If you have you seen it, Sam? Did you get to watch it?
Yeah.
Just hearing that,
That's pretty cool. That's fun.
Yeah, of the little bits we've gotten, that I don't know. I found myself I got a little more excited about hearing that line than I had some of the other stuff we'd gotten so far. It felt more like, yeah, this is Wheel of Time right here.
For sure.
But the other bit of information we get out of this is kind of, sort of, not really huge change, that Tom will not be playing the harp, but rather the guitar.
I guess it was easier to find someone who could play the guitar, maybe.
Probably, yeah.
Just call it a lute, and we'll be good.
Right. I accidentally referred to, I said, instead of a lute on I think our Instagram page, and somebody corrected me. I thought it was a harp. I was like, oh yeah, my bad. Yeah. Yes, it was a harp. It will be a guitar. And actually, Rafe addresses this specifically in his Q&A, which I guess we'll get into here. It's, so Rafe did another Q&A, this time on Instagram, specifically talking about changes to the Wheel of Time. So here comes.
I don't think I haven't read this, so this is cool news to me.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so like I said, here comes the pain. This is
all right, cool.
Some of these are they tend to be more of the softball kind of answers or questions or whatever that he's answering, because he's not going to get too specific at this point.
Sure.
But anyway, Sam, I'll let you read the first.
All right. So the question: who's the most significant season 1 character you invented for the show? There's no one fully invented. Anyone new is either a character pulled from somewhere in the series and changed, or a composite of groups or types of characters personified in one individual, other than Steve, obviously. Nice.
I still love that he's still
they're
hanging on to that.
Yeah. All right, that's fun. I'm as a concept, I know that's a very vague answer. I'm okay with the fact that the MCU has done this liberally. They've made composite characters left and right, and it's kind of funny because you end up cross-pollinating back to comic books with the better versions of these characters. And so obviously we're not going to go back and rewrite Wheel of Time books, but that I think that can be okay. I mean, you see, I think Harry Potter did that some, and it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's not too just flagrantly obvious, and as long as Steve isn't, Rand. His name's Steve, guys. His name is Steve.
Yeah, that's the only difference.
Awful name.
That's the only difference, is that Rand is named Steve.
Steve Althor.
Oh, I mean, we've said this a billion times. Just that, I mean, there are so many characters, so many named characters,
literally thousands
in these books, and so you're going to have to do some combining, but also kind of your Emmons Field 5 plus 5 or 6 more that are kind of all kind of principal / lead characters, and then you have kind of that second tier that is enormous of secondary characters,
and then
right, oh yeah, getting into the villains, and then man, tertiary characters. Once you get into that third tier, then there are so many that people that have more than just a mention and have appear in multiple scenes, but are not really all that memorable.
Right.
And so, yeah, it just makes sense. You got to combine some of those. And I'm sure that there are people who are going to be upset that they're the random character that they attach themselves to at some point doesn't show up in this thing.
There would probably be more people upset if the show adapted the books exactly as the books are.
It wouldn't be successful, I think is safe to say. I mean, you wouldn't be able to create a compelling show that was a thought for thought remake of, books that take, in some cases, 40 hours to read a piece.
That's true.
If you're doing the audiobooks anyway, that would be quite an undertaking. So, next question. How difficult was it to change or leave out characters from the books for screen adaptation? And Rafe says, sometimes very difficult, obviously. People who drive the story or shed light on our characters' backstories or the world of the show always will be more likely to make an appearance. But some people are there in glimpses or subtle nods just for our enjoyment. Some examples were named as characters and given things, looks from the books, so keep your eyes peeled. That I'm looking forward to because, and it's kind of really the follow-up to the previous question. Like, you're going to have, there's, of course, no way you can have all of these characters in there, but they're adding such attention to kind of these background characters that maybe an extra has, a dress that's slashed with green, or whatever. And if you're actually reading along from, the chapter that is kind of being adapted, then you're like, oh, that's so-and-so, the innkeeper's wife who said this in the book, but, or whatever. And that's the kind of thing that'll be fun for us as fans of the book, particularly people that really love to dissect things. You're going to...
I think that's so-and-so, yeah.
Right. And you get to do that. And
that's true. That'll be fun. I just keep coming back to it as long as I'm glad. I think my main thought here is I'm glad that it's not Zack Snyder adapting it at the time. I keep thinking back to Jimmy Olsen, who got shot in the face by a terrorist. And Zack Snyder's like, oh, yeah, it was fun. We got to include him. Like, you shot Jimmy Olsen in the face, man.
Yeah. You don't get to shoot Jimmy Olsen in the face.
No, that's not an okay cameo. Not an okay shout out. So, so this question was submitted by Sarah Nakamura, the super fan, who was hired to be the lore expert on set. The question from Sarah, who is also involved in the show, I suppose, is the main point here.
Yeah.
How many times did I, Sarah, give you blank stares when discussing possible changes? Answer. This one is obviously from Sarah N. There are moments when a thrilled room full of writers would go, we've cracked it. It's amazing. But can insert book, canon, person, place, thing be insert non-canon idea instead? And Sarah's resounding, withering stare would tell us to go back to the drawing board. R.I.P. Parent talking to a bear? What? I do want to see that. Two, please do not put this in this TV show.
Yeah, I kind of want them to do like a completely non part of the show thing where they just get a few members of the cast together just to shoot a scene, to have Perrin.
Just have a cold open like The Office,
Right.
Perrin talking to a bear, and he's sitting in an office and he's drinking coffee, and the bear is sitting across from him also drinking coffee.
Right.
I don't know.
No, you know what? It should be Bobo from the Muppets.
There you go.
Well, hey there, Perrin. How's it going? I laughed when I first read that idea. I could totally see like writers kind of coming to that conclusion.
Like sure, Perrin can talk to all animals. Why not?
Right. But I actually totally support Sarah Nakamura and being like
holding the line, like no. Not a bear, a wolf.
Yeah.
Only wolves.
Yeah. I like the picture of her just kind of staring. I can imagine her kind of being like, I mean, you can do that.
I will not support it or sanction it.
Yeah.
I get it. They have a room full of writers. They're getting creative. The juices are flowing. No, do not do that.
Yeah. And, but I
good call, Sarah. Way to hold the line.
And it does make me feel better about like potential changes not being too outlandish.
Yeah, if there's somebody there that's like, hold on, let's throw some cold water on that idea.
Right, exactly. And the fact that they seem to be listening to her.
Yeah, that's good.
The next question. In the books, we always enter the story on the wind. Will that be a convention we see a lot? And Rafe says, we've tackled the wind in the pilot in what I think, at least, is an unexpected but rewarding way. Excited to see what you think of it. And I'm curious to see what we think of it too. This is one of those non-answers, like, yes, it's in there, but it's not the way you think. And I'm curious to see what you think of it. Like, us too, Rafe.
Show us then, man.
Yeah. I mean, that would actually be a really great teaser, is whatever moment that he's talking about.
Just a teaser of any kind really would be
right. Yeah. My goodness. Actual footage from the set, production footage. That's, not just random stuff with like real music from it. Anyway. Yeah.
Right. Real music from the show. That'd be nice.
Ooh, yeah.
Question. Do you have to change character personalities for a screen adaptation? Answer. We try not to. Most of our job is about making sure that we create a story and scenes that can tell the audience about character motivations and why they're doing something they're doing, when we can't just drop into their heads and say it like you can in the book. This often results in some of the biggest changes, but they're ultimately put in to make sure that the character on screen is as emotionally true as possible.
Yeah,
you got to do that.
Yeah, that's one of those things that it's always part of any screen adaptation. Is you have to show the motivation.
Right.
And so sometimes when you can't show the motivation, you kind of have to tweak it a little bit to make it seem, plausible. You can't slowly show somebody coming to some realization. Sometimes you can. I think of the scene in The Godfather where Michael Corleone is sitting there right before he shoots the two dudes. And if you want to see like a masterclass in a guy making a decision on screen, it's a great moment.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And but in general, that's hard. I mean, like, it takes a Oscar caliber actor to pull it off in a way that makes real sense.
Right.
And so
it's not too subtle, or just kind of flies over somebody's head.
Right. And so you do have to occasionally, and especially for your average TV audience, you got to telegraph things sometimes and be like, this is what I'm feeling. And when in the book, the character may never have said that.
Right.
And,
right.
Next question. Were there any changes in earlier drafts of scripts that were scrapped in the final version? And Rafe said, yes, tons. We're never afraid to try something and see if it works, but then that also has to go through Sarah and me. He says, I drive the writers crazy, as crazy as anyone, sticking to the books. It also goes to Brandon Sanderson, Harriet McDougall, which is RJ's wife, and Maria Simons, who I wasn't familiar with, but I looked at, apparently she was an assistant editor for Team Jordan. He says those folks have been huge helps in checking us and helping us to go back to the drawing board on changes, or many times saying that works and giving us permission to release it, to release a tiny sigh of relief. So
well, that's good. That's good that it goes through like the gauntlet of people.
Right.
I would just wonder how often they've would have said no, and Rafe or someone was like, we're going to do it anyway. I don't know.
Exactly.
That's the question, really.
Because, of course, famously, Brandon said kind of early on that while, largely he's very excited about it, he was honest enough to say there's a few changes I'm not sure about.
Sure.
So, I mean, what that means is Brandon probably said, hey, I'm not sure about these. And clearly they kind of moved ahead with them. And so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Sanderson himself made the point that you want the adaptation to kind of have a soul of its own. And I've mentioned this a few times, but I think it's a good way of putting it is the difference between like the Lord of the Rings movies that had changes and kind of felt like their own thing, but still felt very much like the books.
Right.
And the versus, oh yeah, man, The Hobbit is kind of an example of like one end of the spectrum of going like so far off the map that it's unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And then he actually gave the example of the first couple of Harry Potter movies where it's like they felt so just close to the books that it was like, I could have just read the books.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, for sure.
It would have been better. It just didn't offer anything that was kind of different enough that it felt like
interesting.
That's
next question. Yep. Question: are there some major characters that appear in the first book that won't appear in the first season? Answer: yes, and some of them are still slated to appear in later seasons. Again, approaching the adaptation of the series, not just each book individually. A few of these characters I bet you already expect this for, and one at least I think will surprise you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
My theory, and I mean, at this point, I feel like it's less and less of a theory just because we haven't gotten any word about
I think I know what you're going to say here, yeah.
Is that it's Elaine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I'm like trying to think, are there any other major characters at this point?
Yeah, it's like weird. Or like, are they... It's almost like, are they not going to go to Camelin?
Right.
Could they get away with not going to Camelin?
Yeah, it seems like they
go later. I guess they could. And like, what would they just go straight to Shinar or and the Borderlands?
Right, I would say so. Except it seems like some of the locations that they've chosen, include a palace, and
it'd be weird if they did go to Camelin and did not see Elaine, unless they just didn't introduce her till the White Tower, or something like that. I guess is possible.
I could see them pulling that
pops
off.
Back up when Egwene and Nynaeve go to the White Tower. I guess because it is just sort of like a bit of a cameo, like her just a meet cute with Rand,
right?
Thing like in the garden, he falls over the wall, and
right, exactly.
I can see that. That'd be fine, I guess.
We know we're getting Elida, so presumably that could still be.
You could still have this scene with Morghese, and just like Elaine has already gone to the White Tower, maybe.
Yeah,
sure.
Right. I could see that.
I don't have a dog in that fight. Yeah, I'm okay with that either way.
We still don't have a Morghese though.
Touché. That would be we would have to have a Morghese for any of that to work.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. It's like, I think if you go to Camelin, you could possibly do without Elaine, and therefore you would also do without Gawain and Galad, but that's not a huge deal. And but you have to have Morghese. I think. Yep. I think at that point, because that's your little scrap you get instead of meeting Elaine, and
right.
And she would mention her daughter or something at that point. Anyway, next question. Have there been any major locations or cities you've had to cut for budget or time or logistics? And Rafe says, this is perhaps the biggest source of changes for us. Even with the massive amount of money Amazon has kindly given to us to bring the world to life, to go to as many unique cities, villages, locations as they do in the books is simply impossible. We've chosen to do a few places extremely well, both culturally and with production design, instead of doing dozens of places cheaply and badly. This results in many changes that have huge ripple effects. If you can't go to Barillon, do you meet men? Do you still encounter the White Cloaks? Do you still have dreams of Baelzamon, etc.? I'm betting that most of the things that will feel the most unnecessarily changed to people from the books, even if they're hugely separated from that specific location, will be born out of a location-specific change.
Bro, you threw out a lot of hypotheticals there.
Yeah.
Are those just hypotheticals, or did you actually do that? Obviously, we have men, so...
Right. Yeah.
we know answer to one of those questions.
Right. And so,
we know the answer to another one because the White Cloaks have been in one of those like back behind the scenes leaked photos with the wolf jumping on them. So
yes, yeah, we've gotten a fair amount about White Cloaks, so it's we're gonna get White Cloaks in season 1 for sure. It's just the question of like Barillon is actually a pretty good example, I think, that he pulls up of.
Sure.
One you could totally take out as a location.
They're going to Omaha instead.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, they don't send him to Omaha.
Yeah, that'd be a bad idea. Yeah, pretty objectively a bad idea.
So but it's an example of like the place is not all that important because we don't really return to Barillon, and other than like the one thing that I feel like you get out of Barillon, which I don't know if there's a good way to have this show on screen. To me, the main thing I remember is Barillon, which is not a big city, is the first real
country
city.
Come to town, really.
Right. Yeah. It is the first real city that any of the Emmons Field folk have been to. And it's kind of impressed upon us kind of later that, Camelin and some of these other cities they go to are actually much larger than Barillon. But the first time they see Barillon, it feels very large and bustling. And to them, that's really the only thing. And I don't even know if you could communicate that on screen well. Any of those things could take place at different places along the way. Obviously, I mean, I think most of us would agree that it's better to do the main locations well than to do a bunch of shoddy sets.
I agree with that.
I'll be curious to see like villages, if they do like, you remember the Sam Raimi shows in the 90s, Warrior Princess and Hercules,
right?
How, like there were villages all the time. They just throw up a bunch of the same set pieces.
Just mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. And like you could totally do that with like villages. Barillon is a good example of that would take more than just throwing up a few kind of ramshackle thatch roof cottages kind of things, and then
thatch roof cottages.
I was thinking of Trogdor. Oh, Trogdor!
Burninating the countryside, burninating all the people.
Over Christmas, I showed some of my nieces and nephews Homestar Runner because I was like, what was I watching when I was their age?
Right.
And I pulled this up, and they're like, "What is this?"
Right.
And I'm like, "Well, you see,"
it was
and
a
I
different
realized,
time.
Well, and one of the mind blowing things is, of course, Flash
has been declared dead. Yeah.
Yes, they just killed it. They actually added an update that erases it for you,
right.
And because it's only considered to be a security risk now, and that is just mind blowing.
It is, man.
Anybody Flash like our age,
eating the world back then.
Yeah, every
Jobs
game
killed it.
Yeah, oh yeah, killed it with the iPhone. Really,
it sure did.
But anyway, it was again, it was a simpler time. You didn't have to wear masks back then.
True story. All right, question. Do you attempt to keep book dialogue or start from scratch? Answer. Every writer receives a document when they begin their script put together by our book expert, Sarah, that breaks down every scene in the episode and gives specific dialogue and scene references from the books for it. Especially for scenes that aren't from the books at all, we will find scenes from the books with the same characters together or talking about the same things thematically. That said, predictably, almost all the dialogue in the show is not from the books, so as to sound as natural as possible with our locations, actors, scenes as they're played. Okay. Yeah, okay. I get that too.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it sounds right.
Yeah. No one's going to go like look for passages someone will. We will
someone
not.
Someone will. Yeah. Obviously, there's a handful of lines that I think we're expecting to hear. You got to have things like the wheel weaves as the wheel wills in there.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. But lifting the exact phrase, I don't know, it's not like the dialogue is particularly poetic. Like with Tolkien, to me it was fairly important that they lift as much of the dialogue as possible.
I'm with you on that.
That's not the style of writing that RJ does. It's a little more utilitarian, I think, and so yeah, it kind of makes sense. And as long as it feels right for the scene. I mean, we've talked about it several times, but The Hobbit, kind of love to hate on The Hobbit a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
In the third movie, there's a scene where one of the dwarves said, "You go that way, I got this," and.
Yeah, totally a Tolkien specific phrase there.
Right.
Yo, homie, I got this.
Exactly. I mean, My dad, even, who's not like a huge fantasy nerd or anything, was like, that doesn't sound like a line that Tolkien would have written.
Ad-libbing, hopefully.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It was just odd to I got this dog. Okay, so this next answer to this question has been edited to maintain the safe for work nature of our podcast, though it was kind of funny with the vulgar language. So the question was, how far through the series did you consider when making changes in terms of repercussions? And he says, we have to consider it for the entire series, which has led to many in-room conversations / screaming matches where someone is like, the yellow sister healing someone in this scene cannot be Chesmal Imri. Are you kidding me? You know anything about Chesmal Imri? What, did you just Google some random yellow sister name and pick one you like? Screw you and your yellow sister. It's not going to be Chesmal Imri. I guarantee you that.
Oh, man, I'm picturing the more crude version of this. And it's just great. I haven't even read this, but I'm just putting all the right 4-letter words in all the places, and I am loving it. I love it.
It's funny because as they're saying that, I can totally imagine this conversation, because anybody, and I guarantee you, all of our listeners who has even one nerd friend has had an impassioned argument at some point in their life about some fictional character. And I can imagine that you put a room full of people who are very steeped in the source material, but also there's money on the line. So it's like this combination of love for the material, but also they're stuck in the room also with, I assume a few of the writers are less familiar with the material. Certainly several of the producers, I'm sure, that are in the room probably don't know it at all and are just kind of there to help out and be liaisons and everything. And so I can totally imagine somebody suggesting like, oh, why don't we just get rid of this? And then someone else being like, what? And
to be a fly on the wall.
Right. But I love that, what did you just Google a random yellow sister and pick one you like?
Yes. Well said.
So, I mean, the thing that I guess I'll be curious to see is that when we actually get to see the show is kind of imagining the arguments that led up to some of these changes. And also, I guess it goes to show that when you're watching it, particularly when we're watching it this first season, when there's a change that you're like, oh, what's that going to do 2 or 3 seasons from now?
They're going to have to have gamed it out.
Just knowing that they have a pretty high level of understanding of the lore. So like if they made a change that's going to have kind of a ripple effect down the road, it sounds like that they
know what they're going to do. They're not going to pull a loss and be like, I don't know, we're going to figure it out as we go.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't know where the polar bear came from, man.
That's the bear. That's the bear that Parent's talking to.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like, okay, just charge through that wood. I'm sure everything will be fine. You're not going to get shot by a handgun 7 times.
Put the polar bear in some armor. It'll all fit together.
Right. Yeah, it'll work. You can ride it, whatever.
I want to see that movie.
Well, apparently you're the only one because nobody went to go see The Golden Compass.
I know. And I really wanted to watch. I wanted to like the show, the new His Dark Material show. I don't know. I know some people are liking it. I do not love it. I liked the books a lot. I even like the new books, the new trilogy he's doing. I don't know. The show's not doing it for me.
Yeah.
Readers, listeners, if you are watching His Dark Materials and loving it, please tell me why. Tell me I should go back and watch it. I will try again, but it's just not. Question: have you made changes that hurt used to make but were necessary for the screen? Answer: the writer's room floor is littered with my tears. Truly, though, I don't want people to be unprepared for how different the show is to the books. To do a proper adaptation, it has to be. As a thought exercise, just imagine we can only do 4 of the cities from Eye of the World. So, from Emmonsfield, Terran Ferry, Barrelon, Shadar Logoth, Whitebridge, Four Kings, Breen Spring, Camelin, Faldara, which do you choose? Thinking you can get rid of Breen Spring.
Yeah.
What are the knock-on effects for character and story from the ones you don't go to? Which characters haven't met each other now, and how can you reconnect them? We have amazing writers and hugely helpful support from in Brandon and Harriet to tackle these changes, but they're not small. Gird your loins, my friends. Fair enough.
Yeah. This is the one that you start to feel the pain a little bit because you're like,
this is going to happen. Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder, for the vast majority of people who read these books, years and years ago, are you even going to, I didn't even remember Breen Spring, and I'm rereading this dang book right now.
Right.
As long as you hit some of the important ones, you could potentially skip Terran Ferry. I don't think I'd care about that. Like, we got to have Emmons Field. We got to have Camelin. You got to have Shadar Logoth. Other than that, we can probably get by. And a lot of people, Faldara probably. Maybe I just gave you the list. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. The events that take place at White Bridge are kind of important.
Right. But you could do it somewhere else.
Yeah. Same thing with Four Kings. That's one of the first time ran channels, but we don't even know that at that point. And again, could happen.
Right. I had already forgotten that.
Yeah. It's the lightning strike when they're trapped by the thieves. Yeah. Yeah. And and like you're saying, for people who have even are either just reading it casually or haven't read it in a while, I think there's a lot of these that you could skip over. But yeah, this is more just the kind of, like, if we were talking Lord of the Rings, it's like Tom Bombadil is going to be cut, which made total sense, to be honest. Yeah, right. As some people
didn't fit with the rest of the book that much at all.
Yeah, and some people were very understandably upset about that because he's a fun character and it's a world building chapter. It's if you're really big into the lore, then it takes a lot away to not have him in there. But if you're really trying to focus on the story, as you tend to when you're making a screen adaptation, and less on just the lore and the themes and everything, then it kind of is like, well, it's really got to go. And I think that's kind of part of what he's getting at here is it's like, we just have practical things that we've got to consider. Obviously you can't do every single location. You can't do every scene. And so, it's going to be tough. Okay, so here's the all important question: what made you change Tom playing the lyre? This person said lyre, not harp, so I'm not the only one.
Right?
I know they're basically the same thing. Changing it to guitar. And so he says, Tom is a good example of changes made for the show. For one, I want characters to appear when we have the time to spend to properly introduce them and get enough scenes for them to attract a great actor for the role. You'll never see scenes on this show where 4 random people appear, say 2 lines, and then disappear for seasons.
Right.
Which we've talked a little bit about.
That could totally happen. And as you say that, Elaine is making sense here.
Right. So it just won't get you the caliber of actor you need, and it doesn't properly intro that character to the audience. So for Tom, we wanted to give him a proper introduction. We also wanted him to have a strong masculine energy that made a counterpoint to Moraine. We saw actors of all ages, races, and vibes to play Tom, but when Alex, he says Alex, so maybe I'll start calling him just Alex Williams or William, I don't know, tape came through, we knew he was Tom and moved towards his vibe for the character, which was younger and grittier than the book's Tom. The guitar, much more fitting in his hands and with his voice than a lyre. When he stomps onto the stage in the show, it's a moment, and that's when we want. That's what we wanted for Tom. Never fear, multicolored cloak is still in existence, but different than you imagine. Isis, our costume designer, nailed it. You notice, like Rafe likes to say, but it's different than you imagine. I feel like that's more, I guess, kind of. I don't know. I feel like that's almost a bit of insecurity with him, but also kind of saying like, I don't know how you pictured it, but this is different than I pictured it. So it might be different than you pictured it too.
Right.
And it may be that however it ends up looking, there may be people that, no, that's exactly the way I pictured it. Well, it's good to know that the multicolored cloak is still present. And actually, everything he said there made sense. I mean, I know people were talking about Tom, and we had this whole discussion, I think, way back in our casting episode, like our second or third episode, where I was saying I didn't picture Tom as old, just as being kind of world weary and grizzled and kind of having gone, having his hair turned white at a young age.
Needs to not be old because he's gonna get with Moraine at the very end of the show. So he needs to not be super old.
Exactly. And I think I haven't heard people complain really about Alex, his casting. So I think mostly people are excited because everybody loves Tom. Yeah, and there was, of course, that concern early on that he might get cut. So, right. And I do like the idea that it's like, yeah, you find a character who can play the guitar and sing. Well, yeah, cast that guy and have him play the guitar instead of trying to make somebody learn an instrument that nobody plays anymore in order to be accurate to the books, and it might not feel as real or come as natural. I think Tom with a guitar on his back is just as cool, if not. It's another
makes
example.
Me think of The Witcher a little bit. I mean, obviously, it's a different kind of type of adaptation, but just like how The Witcher did things that were sort of modern-esque in various ways. Maybe I'm just thinking of the music and how the music just was kind of catchy, and you could see how they're gonna go that the riff on that a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and that, speaking of which, it does make me excited for whatever Tom sings and plays. I hope they have some really catchy things. All the Jacko the songs,
Shadows.
Dance with Jack of the Shadows.
Into the Mist. Yeah, right. Yeah. All the Jackos. Fair enough.
Jack of the Mist. Jack. I don't know.
All right. So one left here. Apparently, was not part of the same Q&A. Later added on Twitter, but worth sharing from Twitter. How much of the monster Trolloc fade drag car design is being done practically versus digital effects? Mostly makeup and prosthetics. And with that, how closely does the design match the text? Totally smooth faces on fades, varieties of Trollocs, etc. Answer: we have worked hard to use as many practical effects and pieces as possible for Trollocs and fades, but don't want to spoil all the secrets until you watch the BTS after the first season developing. Additional questions and answers will be added as they come up.
So, one of the things with this is, as people have asked this question, and he's kind of answered this question a few times, where he's saying, well, we're trying to do as much as possible. I'm not going to tell you exactly what. And this time he adds, you watch the BTS, which is reminding us, yay, there's BTS stuff, which is always fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
But the thing that makes me wonder is, like, some people, when they hear something is going to be CG instead of practical, immediately go, well, then it's going to suck. Yeah. It really just depends.
CG has come a long way, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, and it also, it's like, who's doing it, how much they're spending on it, how much time they're spending on it. I mean, it's, you just look at, okay, like, the CW Flash has a lot of dodgy CG, but they did a couple of things at the start of season 1 where they chose to spend time creating the entire city out of CG so they could do all of those swooping shots of him running through the city. Mm-hmm. And it looks like a real city for the most part.
And also the show has heart. Yeah, until later seasons when it's really awful. Apparently,
I love that show, but it is so lame at the same time in a lot of ways.
It's a soap opera. It's a soap opera with superheroes. All the CW superhero shows are.
Oh yeah, it's for sure. Well, and that one especially. I mean, I love it. They even kind of make fun of themselves at some point when they're talking about, like, somebody walks out into a hallway and they're like, "Oh, we're out here having our hallway chat," and
right.
It's like predictably.
It's always so funny that they all have like a jail where they keep people for,
right.
Like, where do they go to the bathroom?
Do they feed these people? Like, yeah.
It's just a bunch of skeletons sitting in these.
Right. Oh, we forgot to feed the prisoners. They're all dead.
Just
dehydration. Yeah. Details. I have the same questions. The mailbag.
Hooray.
We did get one email. Of course, we've been out for the past month, which I'm sure you had a busy month. I had a busy month.
Definitely did.
Typically, we don't get mail when we're not podcasting, so I appreciated this one from Jim/Robin/Ibsen.
Oh, Robin sent us an email. Cool.
Yeah, Robin. He says, "Hey guys, been loving the podcast. It's been fun to go back through them with you guys. I'm a long-term Wheel of Time fan, having gotten hooked in middle school when Tor published the first half of Eye of the World as a free book given away at Barnes and Noble." So that was a while ago.
Yeah.
He says that was a great marketing strategy and reeled me in for the next 13 books. I've been catching up on your podcast and recently listened to the one of the Wheel of Time FPS. So I played a ton of that game in college, and the multiplayer was incredible. Throwing on the fire shield, jumping in lava, and then using the swap spell to trade places with another player.
Nice.
So much fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Rock on, man. That's super cool.
Whenever I hear like another gamer talk about like their maneuvers, I'm like, I so feel that because, right? We all know like it's gaming. It's only so impressive. But to another gamer, you're like, hey, dude, I know that feeling of like when you hit that combo just right.
Perfectly,
it's like, yeah, boom. I did something cool there. He says, also, I enjoyed throwing an earthquake and then using whirlwind to hold someone so they couldn't get away.
Nice.
Having played a ton of FPSs, I have to say it was the most fun and most innovative I've ever seen. The player base was never that large, but we were tight. If anyone out there remembers, Robin of the Greymen says hi. So I guess that was his name on there.
Or something like, yeah.
Also, I wanted to share about the other even longer running Wheel of Time game. This was interesting. The Wheel of Time multi-user dungeon.
Mud. Cool.
Yeah, he says, for the uninitiated, MUDs are entirely text-based games that have amazingly rich gameplay, both PK and RP. Mud operates with the express permission of Robert Jordan and is free to play since '93. I know text-based games sounds nuts, but if you love Wheel of Time, it's worth checking out. You can find out more at watmud.org and tell him Ibzon sent you, IBZON. And he says, keep up the great podcast. Thanks again for the time you put into him for all of us.
Super cool, man. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Man. You know, I think I replied, as I often say, I just appreciate it. It makes our day anytime we get these kinds of messages. You know, we're up to this point, we've chosen not to do Patreon or advertising and whatever. Right. And, so this is our payment. You know, like we said, Sam and I would probably be having some kind of conversation about these books.
Yeah.
In any way. I mean, we kind of just started talking about them, and that was when I was like, hey, we should just do a podcast.
All right.
It makes the extra time of making the podcast happen a lot more worth it. We know that there are people out there enjoying it, and we're definitely going to have to check out that.
The MUD. Yeah, for sure. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that existed.
So Sam, that's your assignment before the next.
Try out the MUD. All right.
Yeah. We'll say before the March update because we may not do one in February since we're doing this one in the middle of the month.
Cool. All right. Yeah, sounds good. I'll do that.
Alrighty.
Awesome. Well, if you enjoy our podcast, please give us a rating, review, wherever you get your podcasts. Like Raveen, please email us at stuff@tsmpodcast.com. You can visit our website at tsmpodcast.com. We have a contact form there. We'd love to have you fill it out. Say hello to us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all at Podcast TSM. Remember, that's Podcast TSM because if you do TSM podcasts on Twitter, that's Thriving Sexy Marriages. If you want a thriving sexy marriage, please check that out.
Right, yeah.
Important also.
And we should contact them sometime because we've done a considerable amount of advertising for them.
Right. They probably have got some Wheel of Time folks who are working on their marriages, you know?
Right, yeah.
Work on your Wheel of Time and work on your marriage.
Right. The two keys of happiness, isn't it?
Exactly. Thanks again, and Tai'Shar Manethrin.